In an audacious and provocative move, a Russian fleet equipped with hypersonic missiles approached the eastern coast of the United States, conducting military maneuvers in the Atlantic. This show of force came just days after Vladimir Putin declared his intention to arm the enemies of the United States. What does this mean for global geopolitics, and how might this action redefine international tensions? Stay until the end of the video to understand everything about this event. The relationship between Russia and Cuba is long and complex, dating back to the Cold War era. For decades, Cuba served as a strategic ally of the Soviet Union, offering a base close to American territory. This partnership was symbolized by the missile crisis of 1962, when the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. Since then, the alliance between Moscow and Havana has continued, even after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The visit of the Russian fleet in June 2024 reaffirms these historical ties and highlights Cuba's geopolitical importance to Russia. In this new era of international tensions, Russia seeks to reaffirm its global influence and demonstrate its power projection capabilities. The frigate Admiral Gorshkov and the nuclear submarine Kazan, part of this fleet, represent the pinnacle of Russian naval technology. Equipped with Zircon hypersonic missiles, these ships are capable of conducting precise long-distance attacks, significantly enhancing Russia's deterrence capacity. The maneuvers carried out in the Atlantic, simulating attacks on targets 600 kilometers away, are a clear demonstration of Russia's military might. The Russian fleet's approach to the US East Coast sends a clear message to Washington and its allies. The current context, marked by the war in Ukraine and Western sanctions against Moscow, makes this movement even more significant. Vladimir Putin's statement about arming the enemies of the United States adds a layer of tension to the situation. With Cuba just 220 kilometers from the American coast, the possibility of Russian hypersonic missiles on Cuban soil evokes a worrying scenario. But what exactly comprises this Russian fleet heading to Cuba? The Russian fleet heading to Cuba is comprised of some of the most advanced vessels in the Russian Navy, notably the frigate Admiral Gorshkov and the nuclear submarine Kazan. Commissioned in 2018, the Admiral Gorshkov represents the forefront of Russian naval technology. With a length of 135 meters and a displacement of nearly 5,150 tons, this frigate is equipped with an impressive arsenal, including anti-aircraft, cruise and anti-ship missiles. Among its most notable weapons is the hypersonic 3M22 Zircon missile, capable of reaching speeds of up to 9 times the speed of sound and with a range of 1,000 kilometers, making it a formidable threat on the naval battlefield. Commissioned in May 2021, the nuclear submarine Kazan is another key asset of this fleet. At 130 meters in length, the Kazan is a state-of-the-art submarine platform equipped with a nuclear reactor, giving it almost unlimited submerged operational autonomy. This submarine can carry cruise and anti-ship missiles, and there are reports that it was recently upgraded to also launch Zircon missiles, further enhancing its combat capability. With a crew of 64 sailors, the Kazan is designed for discreet and lethal operations, capable of operating at considerable depths and with a reduced acoustic signature. In addition to these two standout vessels, the fleet includes a replenishment ship and a tugboat, essential for maintaining logistics and support during the mission. The replenishment ship ensures that the frigate and submarine can operate far from their bases for extended periods, providing fuel, supplies and munitions. The tugboat is crucial for complex maneuvers and emergencies at sea. Together, these vessels form a task force capable of performing a variety of naval operations, from power projection to strategic deterrence. But how exactly is Russia utilizing this powerful fleet in its military exercises in the Atlantic? During the journey to Cuba, the Russian fleet conducted a series of military exercises in the Atlantic that captured global attention. The maneuvers included the simulation of hypersonic missile attacks on targets 600 kilometers away, demonstrating the capability and precision of the Zircon missiles. The frigate Admiral Gorshkov and the nuclear submarine Kazan played central roles in these operations, showcasing their ability to launch devastating long-range attacks. These simulations not only tested the readiness of the Russian weapon systems, but also sent a clear message about the fleet's offensive capability. These exercises are particularly significant in light of the current geopolitical context. With the war in Ukraine still ongoing and Western sanctions weighing heavily on the Russian economy, Moscow seeks to reaffirm its position as a global military power. The manoeuvres in the Atlantic serve as a show of force and a veiled warning to adversaries. The proximity of these operations to the US East Coast heightens tensions, reminiscent of the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, when the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. Now, as then, the presence of advanced weapons so close to American territory is a sensitive point in international relations. How will this Russian show of force be received by the United States and its allies? First, Vladimir Putin's statement about arming the enemies of the United States sparked a wave of international reactions. In the United States, the Pentagon quickly condemned the Russian move, emphasizing that supplying weapons to American adversaries could dangerously escalate global tensions. American authorities stressed that the provision of weapons to Ukraine is solely for defense against Russian aggression, but the possibility of Zircon hypersonic missiles in the hands of American adversaries like Cuba evoked unsettling memories of the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. In response to the approach of the Russian fleet, the United States deployed 3 guided missile destroyers, a maritime patrol aircraft, and a Coast Guard cutter to closely monitor Russian operations in the region. This move is part of a larger effort to ensure that the Russian presence does not pose a direct threat to the US, but also to demonstrate strength and readiness. Additionally, a Canadian Navy ship was also deployed to accompany the Russian visit in Havana, highlighting the increased Allied naval presence in the Caribbean. Given this scenario, the visit of the Russian fleet to Cuba gains even more importance. What happened during this visit, and what does it symbolize for the ties between Moscow and Havana? And what do you think about this situation? Should the US allow Russia so close to its territory? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know what you would do if you were the President of the United States. Between June 12th and 17, the Russian fleet made an official visit to Cuba, strengthening diplomatic and military ties between Moscow and Havana. This visit not only symbolizes the continuity of the historical alliance between the two countries, but also demonstrates Russian support for Cuba at a time of increasing global tensions. During the visit, no joint naval exercises with the Cuban Navy were conducted, indicating that the main purpose was diplomatic. The presence of the frigate Admiral Gorshkov and the submarine Kazan in Havana sent a clear message of solidarity and strategic support. The Cuban Ministry of Defense emphasized that none of the Russian vessels were carrying nuclear weapons, seeking to reassure the international community about the peaceful nature of the visit. However, the arrival of this advanced fleet highlighted Russia's capability to project military power far from its shores and to support its strategic allies. This gesture of friendship and cooperation between Russia and Cuba occurred in a context where global geopolitics is increasingly volatile. The visit also coincided with Cuba's worst social and economic crisis in decades, underscoring the importance of Russian support for the Cuban government. This visit reaffirms the alliance between Moscow and Havana while sending a message of deterrence to the United States and its allies. From a strategic perspective, what does this show of strength mean in the current context of international tensions? The presence of the Russian fleet in Cuba has profound strategic implications. By sending its most advanced vessels to the Caribbean, Russia demonstrates that despite the conflict in Ukraine, it still has the capability and intention to project power globally. This action can be seen as a calculated move to reaffirm its influence in a region historically considered the backyard of the United States. The choice of Cuba as a destination is not random. The island is a longtime ally of Russia, and its proximity to American territory makes this show of force even more significant. For Cuba, the visit of the Russian fleet is an opportunity to show the world that it still has the support of a major military power. Amidst a persistent economic crisis and international sanctions, the Cuban government can use this visit to reinforce the narrative that it has powerful allies willing to offer support. The Russian presence can also serve as a deterrent against any hostile action that might be considered by the United States or other regional adversaries. In the broader context, the Russian move in the Caribbean can be interpreted as a response to the increasing NATO activities near its borders. With the expansion of the Western military alliance and the increased military support to Ukraine, Moscow seeks to balance the geopolitical board, showing that it can equally influence areas of strategic interest to the West. This geopolitical chess game is complex and involves multiple layers of interests and alliances. Besides the direct implications, the visit of the Russian fleet to Cuba could trigger a series of chain reactions. The United States and its allies might see this action as a provocation and a direct challenge to their hegemony in the region. This could lead to an increased American military presence in the Caribbean and a ramping up of sanctions and diplomatic pressures against Cuba and Russia. This cycle of actions and reactions could further elevate global tension, especially if other nations decide to take sides in this dispute. Internally, Russia might use this show of force to bolster patriotism and support for Putin's government. In times of war and economic crisis, military actions abroad can serve as an effective distraction, uniting the population against a common enemy and diverting attention from domestic issues. This strategy has been used in the past and can be seen again in the current situation. Finally, the interaction between Russian and Cuban forces during this visit could set precedents for future military collaborations. If successful, the cooperation might intensify, with Russia possibly using bases in Cuba for naval and aerial operations in the Atlantic. This scenario would resemble the Cold War, when the Soviet Union maintained a significant military presence in Cuba. The impact of these actions will shape international relations in the coming years, influencing defense policies and global alliances. The presence of the Russian fleet in Cuba in June 2024 marks a significant milestone in contemporary geopolitics. This action not only reaffirms the historical ties between Moscow and Havana, but also sends a clear message of deterrence and military capability to the West. With advanced vessels like the frigate Admiral Gorshkov and the nuclear submarine Kazan, Russia demonstrates that despite sanctions and the war in Ukraine, it remains capable of projecting power globally. The military manoeuvres conducted in the Atlantic and the diplomatic visit to Cuba are calculated strategies to balance Western influence and show that Russia is not intimidated by NATO and US actions. However, the repercussions of this movement are complex and multifaceted. While Russia seeks to strengthen its alliances and project power, the United States and its allies must respond to this show of force in their own backyard. This scenario could further increase global tensions reminiscent of the dangers of the Cold War. How these actions will influence international relations depends on the diplomatic and military responses of those involved. The world watches closely, hoping that the delicate balance of power is not disrupted, leading to a new era of conflicts and rivalries. What is your opinion on this Russian visit to Cuba? Do you think Russia is justified in conducting this training so close to the United States coast? Share your thoughts in the comments and feel free to suggest other topics you would like to see covered here. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it. Make sure to subscribe to the What is Happening channel if you haven't already, and check out these other videos appearing on your screen. Thank you very much and see you next time.